August 5th, 1967, in a town called Georgetown, Texas. That is a suburb of Austin. It's about 30 minutes from there. Now, this is the case of a family. They were what was considered an educationally elite family in the town. The father's name was Gordon Wolcott. He came from New Jersey, but relocated to Georgetown, Texas, to work as the head of the biology department at Southwestern University that was in Georgetown. Still is, I imagine. And he was a very brilliant man. He married a woman named Elizabeth who came from South Carolina. She was said to be vivacious and was very involved in their church and the church activities. Their oldest daughter was named Libby. She was 17 at the time that the crime takes place. She was also a brilliant girl. She was someone who everyone assumed would eventually be the valedictorian of their high school class. She was an officer of her class, so I believe that means like a student council officer. She was a brilliant musician and a well-liked girl. And their son, his name was James Gordon Wolcott, and he was 15 at the time of the crime. Also very, very brilliant. It was later found that he had an IQ of 134. Okay, so that is a genius. He was also a wonderful musician. He was a bookworm, always reading. He was a kid who had both glasses and braces, and was a target for bullies, unfortunately. On the evening of August 4th, 1967, James and Libby went into Austin with some friends. I would assume they were probably Libby's friends, but I don't know. And they saw a show. I heard it might have been like a concert, like a rock band, but not sure exactly. They came home around 10 p.m. Libby went to bed in her bedroom. Elizabeth, the mother, went to bed in her bedroom. And Gordon, the father, stayed up on the couch reading a book, which was something that he did all the time. He was an avid reader. James went to his room and he sniffed some airplane glue for a boost hospital as well. The pastor asked the doctors to give James a tranquilizer because he felt that James was so traumatized, so hysterical, that he needed it. When the doctors told James that his mother had died, sadly, he just looked at him and said, "Thank you." He was brought down to the police station for his statement. And at first he said he didn't do it. There was somebody else who came in and did it. But very quickly he was willing to say that he did do it. It didn't take much. So he was held in the county jailhouse until his trial. By the way, he did show the police where the gun was hidden. Now, he needed a lawyer for the trial, and somebody who worked with his father at the university urged a very prominent lawyer to take on the case. And he kind of felt like somebody did need to take the case because the people in the area were fuming at James, as you can imagine. And he said it was like they wanted to, quote, lynch him. And he said afterwards that the time he spent on this case aged him by 10 years, even though he only spent about 6 months altogether from the beginning until after the sentencing. So it was highly stressful, but you understand he got very good representation. Now, while he was in the jail there, some family came to visit him and see if he needed any, help with anything. Family from South Carolina. And one of them is quoted as saying, quote, "Jim has always been on the brilliant side, and he has gone berserk." So, the case went to trial in October of '67. He pled not guilty by reason of insanity. He had been diagnosed while he was in prison or jail. He was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia. And he had said that he believed that his family was trying to destroy him, and that is why he did what he did. It was like self-defense. He was going to get them before they got him. And he had attempted suicide 2 times, according to himself. He had tried to shoot himself, but he had chickened out both times, and that was just a few months before the crime. And he had stated that he was just bored with it all. So in order to claim that he was criminally insane, they're having to suggest that he was so mentally ill that he didn't know what he was doing, he didn't know right from wrong, and that he was delusional. So that was what the defense was going with. Now, the prosecution some things that seemed to put the defense into question. They made it sound like James was just angry with his family, and that is why he did this. James had said that his mother chews so loudly that he has to leave the room when she's eating. He had said that his sister has an accent that is so annoying he can't stand it. And his father would not let him go to anti-Vietnam peace rallies. He wouldn't let him wear the anti-war buttons, and he made him cut his hair. And James was considered, it said, quote, a peacenik, P-E-A-C-E-N-I-K, I think so, very into peace, which is kind of ironic. And while he was in jail within the first 2 days there, while the funeral was taking place, in fact, he wrote a letter to one of his associates in the peace movement, apologizing not for killing his family, but apologizing for bad publicity for the peace movement because of the fact that he had used a gun. He had also said while he was in jail that he was sorry for killing his family, but he also stated that he kind of feels okay. That was also within the first couple of days. Anyway, the jury was made up of all men. I don't know if that really matters, but it's just a fact. And they quickly found him not guilty by reason of insanity. And he was sentenced to an indefinite amount of time at the Rusk State Mental Hospital, where he would stay until he would be deemed sane. So off he went, and he said he was pleased with the verdict. While he was at Rusk, one of his psychiatrists felt that he didn't deserve to be there, for whatever that means, and he took him home with him to live with his wife and kids. So he wasn't afraid of James. He didn't see him as a danger, and he didn't think that it was right for him to stay at the mental institution. I mean, he spent his time there, I imagine, during the days and did the activities, but he slept at the psychiatrist's house. And by 1974, it had been 6 years, and the medical director recommended that he be freed or released because he was no longer suffering from paranoid schizophrenia. And he was freed. And at that time, since he was the only living heir, he received his family's estate. And he received monthly payouts not sure what that means for when they ask, have you ever been convicted of a felony? You know, those kind of questions. I guess if you're found not guilty by reason of insanity, then you haven't been convicted. I mean, I'm not a lawyer, but I guess that's how it would work. So nobody knew. And he had worked there for around about 27 years when the story broke. People from Georgetown were wondering whatever happened to that guy, because it was a big deal in their town. They talked about the town, they kind of referred to it as like the days before that happened and then the time after that happened. Like history was separated into two segments. So it was a big turning point when he committed that atrocity. So the newspaper in Georgetown, Texas, they did a report. They actually came and interviewed him. And I did read that article. I think that's pretty much what started the whole thing. It was around about 2013. So I guess he agreed to be interviewed because he knew they were going to do the story anyway. I am assuming that. So they wrote this piece on it, and basically everything I've told you is what is in there. And here is a picture, a photo of him sitting with his back to us, talking to the reporter. So when the university found out, they decided to keep him. Because he hadn't lied. I mean, he hadn't deceived them. He just hadn't offered that information. And they said that it was sort of a story of redemption. There would be no reason to fire him at that point. So he stayed on. During the interview, he said that he loves to read. He reads all the time, loves to keep on learning constantly. He specifically enjoys reading Freud in German. He is an excellent guitar player. He doesn't like to drive. He rarely watches any TV. And he is not married, and he doesn't have children. He is said to be a guy who can talk about any subject, with the exception of pop culture. He hasn't been in any kind of legal trouble or trouble at work, and has really devoted himself to academia. As of now, 2022, I looked up the university staff list and found his name there, but it said he was emeritus, which means that he is currently retired, but he is an honorary staff member. So that's all I know about him as it brings on like a lot of anger and rage. Like, you might just lash out at them verbally, usually, in an, sort of a way that doesn't seem like it's warranted. Like someone will be chewing and you don't like the sound of it, and you will scream curses at them, and but it's a thing, it's a real thing. So I suppose he had that. Now, the airplane glue, could that be the reason why he committed these murders? Or did he take that airplane, did he sniff the glue to give him like courage to do what he wanted to do anyway? Because it said he sniffed it to give himself a boost, and I guess they got that from him. Like he needed a little boost to do what he wanted to do. So, personally, I don't buy the criminally insane piece of it, and what's even more interesting is that his psychiatrist at Rusk said he didn't deserve to be there. Which is kind of weird, because I get it that he's saying he's not, psychotic, he shouldn't really be here. But yet, if he doesn't deserve to be there, then he deserves to be in prison. Doesn't anyone get that? Like, doesn't the psychiatrist understand that? By you saying he's not suitable to be in the mental institution, what that means is he is suitable to be in prison, not to be at your house with your family. That confuses me a lot. So after he got out of Rusk, he went ahead and got himself a great education, and he really made something of himself. So is that enough? Can we just say, well, it worked out anyway? He didn't go on to kill anyone else, so instead he went ahead and he became a wonderful professor. And he taught lots and lots and lots of people. And maybe he really knew psychology a lot more than others, because, So, does that make it like, alright, well, what about punishment for what he had done? Did he really get any punishment for his crime? So now what about the university when they found out about him? Do you think that they should have kept him, or they should have asked him to retire or fired him? Was he still a good professor? Was there a reason to let him go? That's a rough one, because the students really liked him up until that point, and I don't think they wanted him to get fired. So I don't know, but you have to imagine yourself as a student. How would you feel if your professor had killed his family when he was 15? Would you look at him differently? Yeah, I'm sure. Would you be able to respect him as much? Well, you could say he turned his life around, but there is nothing in any of what I read stating that he ever really said, I did a terrible thing, I shouldn't have done it, this is why. Like, he never explains himself or really apologizes for it or anything of that nature. I think it would sound a lot better if he did, if that was part of the story, that, he talked about it, and if he would talk about how it happened, why it happened, what he could have done differently, what he should have so